Welcome to the Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be hear stories from other mothers and top experts in the pregnancy and postpartum care field. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. You can also find us at goldenhour.fm on Instagram for comments and questions. Welcome to today's episode of the Golden Hour. I'm your host, Dr. O, and today I am joined by a dear friend, Alana Walker. Alana Walker is a corporate lawyer at Waymo, formerly Google's self-driving car project. She lives in San Francisco with her husband, Chris, and their bright-eyed, rambunctious, she's definitely full of energy, 2.5-year-old daughter, Amari. Originally from Long Island, New York, Alana earned her undergraduate and master's degree from Stanford, where we met, and her law degree from Columbia. And yet behind her polished facade, Alana wrestles with the relentless demands of her profession and the delicate balance of family life. Welcome, Alana. That's exactly why we're here. We're here to talk about the so precarious balance of life, work, motherhood. I've said this before. I'll say it again. It's friends like you and conversations like the conversations we've had over the years that have inspired me. I think I feel so fortunate that, yes, I have my job where I get to care for so many patients, but there's also something about having conversations that are outside of the clinical space where people are even more vulnerable and more raw to kind of really get a sense of what it means to even contemplate motherhood, let alone be a mother. And so I'm grateful for you joining us today so we can talk more about that.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I feel like it's just an extenuation of our friendship.
Yes, exactly. It's literally conversations that we've had before. The difference is, I feel honored that we get to share that with a wider audience. I think, so much of why I am so passionate about this project is I think a lot of people can sometimes feel like they're going through a lived experience, but in isolation. And so recognizing that conversations that we have are conversations that other people need to hear because maybe they've gone through or had similar thoughts. I think it's so important to me. So I'm excited to learn even more about you and share what I know with a wider audience. So let's dive in, shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Pre-Amari, when you and Chris were starting to even think about building a family, what were some of your thoughts of motherhood in those, in that year or months before you guys even started trying?
No, I think I probably didn't give it as much thought as I needed to have given it and as much thought as it deserved for making such a monumental decision in our lives. But I think when I thought about motherhood, I really thought about kind of like what my mother did, some of my aunts did, and just kind of people in my life that I knew and loved and thought about modeling their behavior. So I knew it was going to be a balance and difficult because I was working at the time and I knew it would take a ton of time out of my day that was pretty well packed with work to be a mother. But I really just thought about it as having like a little tiny human running around that I could care for and bring to the park and have like fun adventures with and make memories, which is what they are, but it comes with a lot more that I was not contemplating. And maybe it's because a lot of the mothers in our lives tend to make it look so easy that you don't know all the hard work that goes behind it until you're in the thick of it and experiencing it yourselves.
Mm-hmm. No, it's true. I really do think that it's so important to kind of remove the facade in that starting a family, raising children, it's incredibly beautiful and incredibly valuable. But one of the reasons why I myself am personally not like a high social media user is because I think people oftentimes project like the best, most perfect parts. And I think the real dirty, raw, kind of unfiltered stuff is what we really need to hear. And so it sounds like, pre-Amari, you had a sense of the special moments. Was there anything that you were most worried about or anxious about?
Honestly, I think I was probably most anxious about like the financial or two pieces,
Mm.
the financial element. And I think that was really kind of my threshold for being like, oh, yeah, I'm ready to have a child, is because I'm in a financially stable place in my life and I know where I'm going professionally. And we have enough disposable incomes and we have an apartment that has extra space and we can do X, Y, and Z. And I've looked at the cost of daycare and or nannies and the cost of other childcare and for health insurance, adding another party onto it. I was like, I felt ready there. And then I think the other piece was I realized that you'd have to give up some of the flexibility of your life. We like to travel a lot before we had our child. We have traveled a ton since we've had her as well, but really kind of recognizing in those early years, you'll probably be confined to the same locations for quite a while as they grow up and are able to do more. You're pretty much tethered to home. So I think that was the other thing that I was really focused on, was like, A, the money piece of it, and B, for let's say like the first 5 years or so, like what is my life going to look like now that I can't just pick up on a weekend and go visit a friend abroad, or I can't go have this girls trip every month that I generally have with different segments of my friends. So that's really kind of was my focus area. There's so much more to it than that. That's what I've learned.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, even this is how I know that fellow type A women we gravitate towards each other, because even the way that you approach it, where it's like, well, I realize that financially we're ready because we had this and health insurance and childcare support and is exactly how my mind rationally wants to approach it. But that's only just like the tip of the iceberg with parenting. Is like, yes, the logistics, which are just as important, but there's so much more. And so in this conversation, in this next hour, we're going to get to the rest of the iceberg. We're going to see what's underneath the surface once you've crossed over to the other side, if you will. Okay, so it sounds like we have a general sense of your thoughts about motherhood prior to starting. What was it like once you were pregnant? What was your pregnancy experience like for you?
My pregnancy experience was actually fairly calm and uneventful until the end. Getting pregnant proved difficult for me, but the actual pregnancy itself, I think the first trimester, I had some fatigue. So I was pretty tired for a big chunk of it. So I was like sleeping 12 hours a day or so. But once I got past that 12 to 13 week range, the fatigue kind of wore off. I didn't have any kind of morning sickness or nausea. I didn't have swelling. I didn't have preeclampsia or gestational diabetes. I didn't have like real aches and pains that a lot of women kind of experience. So I think in terms of pregnancy, my pregnancy like went pretty smoothly. I didn't gain that much weight. My husband used to like joke. He was like, you can't actually tell you're pregnant until from like the side, is when you actually see the bump, because front on, I just kind of look the same. From behind, I kind of look the same. And it was like, there's a huge baby bump there. So I felt pretty fortunate there. And my daughter went pretty easy on me, because I know a lot of women that have pretty severe symptoms in pregnancy. And I feel like I got really lucky in terms of I maintained a fairly active lifestyle. I would still go on walks and do some mild exercises. I would still travel, obviously modified my diet as needed, largely like ate what I wanted and didn't have any issues with that. And then the hard part came is she decided she wanted to come a little bit early. She cut the pregnancy a little short. But in the silver lining of that, because my understanding is like post 33-ish weeks is when you start getting really uncomfortable, because you can start getting like really big. And she got out of there before that. So I didn't even get the feeling of being like, oh, when is she coming?
Yeah. I think about it because I also happen to have been your OBGYN, and I was, in retrospect, I was thinking to myself, like, was either Alana like just a really easy patient and that's why I just never heard from her that much? Or did she really have an easy pregnancy? And it sounds like, bar the fact that Amari did decide to barge into the world a couple weeks early, your pregnancy itself sounds like it was pretty smooth.
Yeah, the pregnancy itself was pretty smooth, and I consider myself lucky there and happy that it was pretty smooth, because I'm kind of a type A anxious person. So any sort of ailment that I would have had, I probably would have started tail spinning. So luckily I didn't have anything to cause real concern. I think the only thing is I had some I have like a weekly nosebleed, and that was like my only pregnancy symptom. It was like nosebleeds, which apparently is like fairly common.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was a fairly common symptom until it happened to me.
It is, yeah, nosebleeds are incredibly common, but it is one of those things where I think that's what I see the most in my job is we have like this patient portal where patients can message and either hear from us directly or our nursing team. And there are so many things where I'm like, yeah, duh. Like it happens all the time. It happens all the time. When it happens to your body for the first time ever, you're like, how can this be normal? Like this doesn't seem normal to me. Or heartburn, when it's really bad, like can feel horrific. I can literally feel like a heart attack. And so heartburn when you're pregnant can get really bad. And so there's all these things where you're just like, my body physically is manifesting things I didn't know was possible. Am I safe? Please help me feel safe. So
That
glad
does
for you
remind
that it
me.
was just, go ahead.
I was going to say the heartburn piece did remind me. I think around like week 30, I was like laying down. I was like, ugh, what is going on? Like, I didn't even eat anything today. And my stomach is feeling terrible. And Chris was like, I think that's heartburn. And I had never experienced heartburn. So I actually didn't know. And I was like, but it's like my esophagus. It's not my heart. I thought heartburn was like where your heart. He was like, sweetheart, I love you, but no.
Oh, that was heartburn, Alana.
I
That was
know.
heartburn. That's so cute. Yeah, that was heartburn. I can have you tell the story if you wish. The Mari arrival story was, I think it was similar where you had like this kind of vague-ish symptom. I think you were at a party and you're like,
Yeah.
what is this that I'm feeling?
I'm happy that you were my OB and also my friend outside of in the world. So I could just text you like a friend, be like, hey, this is happening. And I was out at a mutual friend's going away party and I had some food. We were in the Mission in San Francisco, picked up a burrito at like 10 p.m., as you do, went home, ate part of my burrito, and I was like, my stomach feels weird. And it wasn't heartburn because I had learned what that was. And I wasn't laying down, so I knew it wasn't that. But I was like, feeling a little crampy. So I remember like texting you, and then you were like, yeah, you should probably call in to the actual like hotline so we can like document this. And then I called in, and they're like, yeah, it seems like, I don't know, maybe you have a UTI or something. That's some of the symptoms. Cause I was like, I feel like I have to pee, but I don't have to pee. Like, I don't know what's going on. And they're like, come in, we'll check you out. I came in. You were actually on call that night, which was great. Saw you, saw some other people, did an ultrasound. They were like, you're having some contractions, but we can't really tell if they're useful contractions or they're the Braxton Hicks. And I was like, these are like the fake practice ones. Cause see, when I like stand up and like stretch a little bit, they go away. And that's what happens with them. Then 10 hours later, Amari was born.
She was born. And I remember too, I remember checking your cervix or something for dilation. And I was like, and you were explaining it to me and you seemed so calm. I was like, yeah, it's probably just indigestion, maybe a little, just like preterm contractions, but not real labor. I remember checking your cervix being, okay, I do think we have to have you stay, but she's probably not going to come. And I remember leaving my shift and saying goodbye, being like, okay, I'll see you when I get back here. Like, you're probably just going to stay for a night or two.
You were like, we're going to give you these injections just in case. I'm going to come back later this afternoon and check on you, blah, blah, blah. They rolled us into a room. They were going to bring in like the NICU doctor because they were like, if she comes, like, just so you know what's going on. Homegirl did not wait long enough for any of that.
She ain't got time for that.
She was like, I'm coming and I'm coming now.
Now. I know it reminds me of her, I think it was her 1-year-old birthday party. Wasn't it Wonder Woman themed? And I had this like little image. I mean, obviously this is not really how babies come out, but I have this little image.
Her little fist like, let me out.
Yeah. Her just like coming through full force. That's
and
Amari
I remember
for you.
You did come back to the hospital later that afternoon because I think you left at like 8 a.m. or something like that. And you were like, bye, I'll come back like later after I sleep and I'll come back and like check on you and see how you're doing. And then you came back at like 2 and she was already born. And you walked into the room and you were like, what happened? And I was like, I don't know. You're the doctor.
I remember because like, it was from my overnight shift. So I go home to like have a bit of a nap and I wake up getting text from my colleague who took care of you. It's just like, your friend's baby's here. Couldn't keep her in. She like came flying out, but all is well. And I was like, okay, wow. Okay, well, I'm definitely coming back. And this time I'm coming back to meet your baby. So what I was saying, you mentioned earlier that one of the reasons why you were like grateful for Mari to come early was that you didn't necessarily have to feel the third trimester like woes in terms of feeling so uncomfortable by having like a full term baby in there. But there's also probably potentially a lack of preparation when she came so early. Like, how did you and Chris feel when she arrived? And she came, you said, I think at 33 weeks, right?
She came at 33 weeks. So we were prepared and not prepared. At the same time, Chris will joke about as we were going out the door at like midnight or whatever it was to go to the hospital, he was like, we don't have the car seat. We don't have this. He was constructing her dresser like in the living room at the time. And I was like, she's not coming. And even if she does come, she's not going home with us. So it's fine. There was like me being like, I don't know what he's stressing about a dresser for. She doesn't need a dresser. And then it's him like, we don't have our go bag, which we kind of needed like the balance of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So we definitely were not prepared for her. But one of the good and bad things about a newborn is they don't actually require that much stuff. So we had those necessities already. Like we had her bassinet and we had like newborn sized clothing. We had like birth cloths and we had some diapers and we had bottles and I had my pump and stuff because I'm type A. So I was like ultra prepared. So it was things like the dresser that wasn't built, but we had like the rocking chair and like her crib and all of those things were already set up. And then one of the silver linings of her coming early at 33 weeks, and like one of the benefits for her is she came out small, but pretty much fully baked. She could breathe on her own. She could regulate her own body temperature. So it was really about just getting her to be bigger before releasing her. So she stayed in the NICU. So we had for 2.5 weeks. So we had 2.5 weeks of going back and forth to get acclimated to her and to really fully prepare for bringing her home. And this is where like the village really took hold. Like my parents flew out from New York and we're in San Francisco. My Chris's family is from San Francisco. So they were there. We had like small clothing, but we didn't have preemie size clothing or really that much newborn stuff. So our moms went out and like bought a bunch of stuff and washed it. And then also we got a bunch of support and care from the NICU with helping with breastfeeding and pumping. So we knew like what sort of extra preemie formula we would need for her coming in and helped me create like a stockpile of milk for her. So when we actually did bring her home, I think we were definitely better prepared when we did bring her home than we would have been had she been full term and we were preparing on our own. Because we learned how to change diapers, how to give her a bath, how to check for X, Y, and Z, like what her sleep, wake, feeding schedule should be. We learned all of that stuff in the NICU, which we would have learned trial by fire if she had been a full term baby and after 2 days, they would have been like, all right, have a good life.
Here's your baby. You take that home.
Human.
No returns.
Yeah.
That is actually a very thoughtful reflection. I think because we work so close in hand with the NICU, I forget what a valued resource they are for patients who have premature children and how scary and how surprising that can be for those parents. But I think the NICU, because of that, they have so much built-in support already. And so as you're transitioning into parenthood, you have a bunch of people who are like, here, this is what you need to buy. This is what you need to get. Like, this is how you do X, Y, Z. And then when something very acute and sudden happens, like your village, as you say, people come flocking in to lift you guys up again.
Yeah, it was incredibly helpful. And we still joke about it to this day, like, we don't know what we would have done had she been full term and they would have been like, bye-bye. Like, we wouldn't even know how to put her in her car seat properly. And like they do a whole car seat check where she's got to be in it for an hour and like breathing properly. And they make sure it's tight and snug and they show us how to swaddle. Like literally they taught us how to do all the parent things in the NICU. And we had 2.5 weeks of that. of training on being parents. And then they sent her home and we were still a nervous wreck. But had we not had that, I would be like, what is this tiny human I'm supposed to keep awake? How often do I feed her? How much food? Like what?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, many things have inspired this project. I alluded to the fact that just having conversations like we've had was an inspiration, but also just thinking about how can we better prepare parents, not only for I think pregnancy, we do a pretty good job. Like prenatal care, I think we've really sorted that out because we understand how important prenatal care is to have the outcome for the birthing person and their babies. But I think postpartum care can be so much better. And so even hearing you, like, again, not ideal to have a premature baby, but the NICU was so supportive. You basically had like a 2-week high intensity tutorial, right? Like how do we create something similar to that for parents who have full term babies, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what that solution looks like, but like I can't help but hear you and want to recreate, that support that you and Chris had for those first 2 weeks. I'm glad that you guys had that.
Yeah, we are very glad. And Amari does not know it, but she is also very glad.
She's also very glad. She's also very grateful. So first 2 weeks, it sounds like a lot of help making that transition. How was it when you guys got home with Amari? How were your first 3 months postpartum home?
First 3 months postpartum home were definitely difficult and probably more difficult than I could have anticipated. Everyone talks about hormones being real and causing all sorts of mood shifts and changes, but they're real. They're a doozy. They affect you whether you want them to or not. So I would go from being like fine to like crying. There's sleep deprivation. And since she was a preemie, she took longer to hit certain phases or milestones because it's basically like she had to get up to what would have been her due date and then progress. So she had an adjusted age for quite a while. So she stayed in that newbornish state for longer than most newborns would. So she was up every 3 hours for a longer period of time than most parents experience. So like 2 months in, most kids are like, they can do 5 hours or so. And Mari was still like waking up every 3 hours, like, I'm hungry, feed me. So that was difficult. And I think just adjusting to your life revolving around a tiny human. And previously, my life kind of revolved around what I wanted to do. Like I could do my work. I did my work and I had my job and I had my husband and my family. But really, the first 3 months postpartum, it's like there's this tiny human who legitimately cannot do anything for themselves. They can't even hold their own neck up. They need to be fed by you, cleaned by you, change their diaper, make sure their neck is supported, make sure they don't roll over and accidentally suffocate themselves. They can't do anything. Chris used to say they're inept at everything, but adept at trying to harm themselves. And like, that is so true. So it was like transforming my life to care for this tiny human who has no idea about needing sleep or sleep deprivation or that I'm exhausted and all I want to do is get another like 20 minutes of sleep. And she's like, no, you're going to change this diaper like right now. And you're going to feed me right now. And I'm going to spit this up all over you. So now you're going to have to change your clothes and my clothes and maybe take a shower, but I'm not going to let you put me down. Otherwise, I'm going to have a screaming fit. And you're also lactating. So the warm shower will not actually clean you because you'll just have milk everywhere. So enjoy.
I mean, it's so well articulated. I can literally imagine the scene. Like you've painted it perfectly. And there's so much I want to pick apart in what you just shared. I think the first thing you mentioned was that the hormones are real, that the emotional roller coaster is real. Can you talk more about that and what, if anything, information you could have gotten in pregnancy that could have prepared you for the emotional aspect of postpartum?
I heard prior to being pregnant and during pregnancy that postpartum depression and postpartum anxiety exist and kind of what they are and what they feel like and the difference between maybe some baby blues, which happens like immediately after, and actual postpartum depression, and that there would be questionnaires that I would fill out. And I heard about it, but I didn't really internalize it or think about it too much. And I think, especially once she came home, I think while she was in the NICU, I was kind of on autopilot and we were kind of doing everything to get her home. So we were going to the NICU 12 plus hours a day and caring for her and being there. And we had the village at home who would make us dinner when we returned home and go grocery shopping for us. So when we would go back the next day, we would be able to have lunch there. My husband was really great about setting up alarms for me to like get up and pump for like milk for when so we would bring it to her in the NICU. And it was kind of like on autopilot and we were just kind of going. And then it was the reprieve and like the happiness of finally bringing her home after 2.5 weeks. And then it was like, this is the real deal. This is it. You have no backstop. You have no highly trained nurses and doctors and physicians caring for your child at every hour of the day. Like the only person she now has is you. And I think the magnitude of that really hit home when she was home. And we also didn't have the backstop of, all of the machines that tell us she's breathing fine and her oxygen saturation and her heart rate. And it was basically like going over to her bedside and being like, "Is she okay? You haven't heard from her in a little while. Is everything okay?" And then realizing at a certain point that like, that's not a normal reaction. And then also just kind of like the unpredictability of your days. I don't handle surprise well. Like, I don't do surprises at all. Never give me a surprise birthday party. If it's I want to know where I'm going for dinner. I want to look at the menu beforehand so I can plan what I want out in ahead. Like that's the type of person I am. I don't want any surprises in life. A baby is just one surprise after the other. So I think the combination of the anxiety of having her and not having the trappings of like comfort and knowledge and knowing that there are professionals around to care for her when I have no idea what I'm doing. My general inclination to be type A and a little bit higher on the anxiety level. And then also just, I do think it's like normal hormonal imbalances after the fact came together for a confluence of making me, I was a bit high strung for a little while. And I wish I would, in retrospect, I wish I would have listened more during pregnancy about what could happen, like more about what would have happened in the fourth trimester, so to speak, and like what to look out for and what's normal, quote unquote, and what's abnormal and the resources that you can have set up in place beforehand, just so you have them at the ready and don't have to go searching for them or searching for those answers when you're in the thick of it. I think that would have been useful. But then again, like, I don't know if I would have taken note of that because I wasn't thinking about like, oh yeah, it could happen to me. And this would be a useful like phone number or email address to have at the ready, or maybe have a therapist waiting in the wings, or even just meeting with them regularly because it won't hurt. If you don't have a problem, you can still talk about something else. But if you do, they're ready in there. So it's tough to say, but I wish for myself I would have been more on top of that as I was on top of a lot of other things with like getting a night nurse and all of the details of her room and the X, Y, and Z set up above and beyond well in advance. Like I wish I would have done some of the other things for me in advance. And I think that's maybe what gets lost is it's all about the baby as it should be, but there's not much about like the mother and like what you need.
Yeah. I mean, you said it best. I think that, I think there's so much we can do to prepare ourselves. And I think we live in a day and age of like hyper information. Like we have access to so much. We like anything that anyone else has done or recommends, we can either see it because they posted it on social media, or friends are going to tell, like, recommend their shopping wish lists. And we're like so consumer driven that we think about, okay, this is what I need to have the perfect nursery so that Amari can have all the things that she needs at the ready. But somewhere in that checklist, we forget about ourselves. And I think, to me, my job as a good OBGYN is to help women think about themselves in that checklist. And I think when I feel like I've not done my best at supporting my patients, or situations like this, not like your own civic example, because I happen to be your doctor and I hope I did a good job, but just recognizing that healthcare in itself, like, yes, we have this great system where we give what you described, that mood survey, is that Edinburgh postpartum depression scale, where at least with our group, it's given halfway through the pregnancy to kind of screen people who might be at risk for postpartum depression and anxiety. And then it's given, at the end at your follow-up postpartum visits. And those are just 2 touch points, which helps us kind of like flag if there's any issues. But for some women, and for a lot of people, halfway through the pregnancy, 20 weeks, like, you're feeling pretty good. Your energy is back. Your fatigue's gone. What depression? What anxiety? I'm still sleeping well. It's an interesting time to check in. But, for some people, it truly does. It is an important flag. And I have that conversation like, hey, let's get a therapist now, even though you don't think you need it, because you're going to need it later. Like, and I feel grateful when I can have those conversations. But for a lot of people, they're in the thick of it. And that's when they need the most help. But when you're in the thick of it and that newborn is spitting up on you and your breasts are leaking at the same time and you're like trying to do XYZ as well, like, that's also a really hard time to like search through the phone book and find who's phone's book these days, search through Google and find a therapist. And so, I appreciate you because you said something like, oh, well, that should have been on me. I should have thought about myself on that checklist. But I turn it back and saying like, no, it's on us. Like, again, like that, the healthcare system and the people who work in it, like, we can do better. Like, and when I hear you, I keep on thinking about what could we have done better?
I think it's a society thing. I don't think it's just me. I don't think it's just healthcare. I think it's just society. When a woman's pregnant, the whole experience is wrapped up around like bringing this baby to life and bringing the baby home and caring for the baby. In so many ways, I feel like the woman or the mom gets lost in that or takes the back seat, which is understandable to a certain extent. But if the mom is not functioning well, the baby's not going to function well. So it behooves everyone to remember that we exist.
Yes. No, I mean, I say this, I mean, I have many, many conversations with patients who are dealing with postpartum depression, anxiety. And I think it's, I have inspiring conversations with friends that have prompted me to work on this project, but it's also the conversations that I find heartbreaking, that have inspired me, where I hear patients who are going through the thick of depression and anxiety postpartum. And I often say, like, you can't care for the people that love you. You can't care for that baby until you care for yourself. And like that shift of, yes, 100% babies, like, literally are defenseless. Like, you have to do everything for them. But at some degree, you also have to prioritize yourself. And you're right, there's a bigger system and society at large that has to help prioritize moms, right? It's so, so important.
It's really important. And I think once I truly realized, I was like, okay, I'm not feeling great. I'm not doing well. I'm not succeeding in this. And then I took stock of what was going on, spoke to my husband, was like, we need to make some changes because I can't sustain this way. And it's getting outside help in terms of a therapist, getting outside help in terms of, I was on leave, but we still brought in a part-time babysitter for regular hours every week. We had his mother come over for a regular time every week. So to give me kind of those breaks that I wasn't feeling that I was getting so I could like get care for myself and also just do other things that made me feel normal or like functioning. So it'd be like, okay, I'm going to get a shower today. Like that's actually going to happen and that will be good. I'm going to be able to make my therapist appointment today. I'm going to be able to go for a walk outside in the sun and get some like vitamin D and restorative. I'm going to go get boba, which will make me happy. Though just those everyday things. And like every week I would do like one extra thing. And then slowly I felt like I was like coming back to myself as I was
Yeah.
getting designated time. Because when you're in the thick of it, it was literally like, I don't know when the last time I showered was. This is wild.
So I'd like to take a moment to tell you this is my passion project based on years of experience as an OB/GYN doctor. I aim to empower moms and moms-to-be and those in the pregnancy and postpartum care space. If you appreciate what I do, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so it can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, suggestions, or questions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Alana, when did you have your like, aha, like, okay, like this is an SOS kind of moment? Like, was that 3 months in, 4 months in? Like, when did you finally like realize like, we've got to make a change?
My SOS moment, I think, came probably mid-January. So a couple of weeks after we brought my daughter home from the NICU. My husband, he had some friends that were in town from LA and they were planning to go to a park like nearby. And he was like, oh, we can bring Amari, we can walk around, it'll be fun. And I was just like, I can't go to a park with her. Like, we can't leave the house. And I was like, wow, I'm having a visceral reaction to going like a 10-minute drive away to a park to see friends with a child. Like it has reached a level. So like he went and he was like, okay, you stay back and you like try to actually relax.
Yeah.
And I will take Amari. And he did for a few hours. And like, obviously everything was fine, but I was like a disaster and a nervous wreck the entire time. And then I was like, this is the time when I realized like, okay, something's up. Needs to shift or change because this is not how I need to interact in the world and have like this level of anxiety about the simple task of like driving 10 minutes away with her, not to a doctor's office, but to like a park to go see friends. And I was like an insurmountable burden. I was like, I have to get dressed and I have to brush my hair. I don't know when I'm going to shower. I'm going to pack the bag. And it was just too much for me to deal with. And I was like, and I think that was like my epiphany of like, okay, something is going on. I need to take a step back and maybe ask my husband and ask some friends and third parties who I know care about me. Like, what do you think we should do or I should do? Because I'm not in a position to be objective at this moment. I don't think I'm making the most logical, rational sense or making the best decision. So I will now defer to trusted friends and family.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like one, I'm grateful that you had enough awareness to like be like, hey, hold up, like that visceral response to like a leisurely, afternoon at the park with friends, like caused something like deep within me. It caused a panic that I know I shouldn't normally have. So I'm glad that you had that wherewithal. But it also sounds like you had a two-pronged approach, if you will. It sounds like you're like, okay, I need to get mental health support for me, but I also need to rely on like resources, whether it was childcare and family. So I also have more time in the day for me. Is that a good summary of how you approached it?
Yeah, that was my approach. I think it was my initial thought was like, I need to go get mental health care for myself, but when am I going to have the time to do this? Blah, blah. So that it was the first iteration was like setting up time for me to not be on mommy duty, so to speak. And I think that and then setting up that time. And it started with, it's just like a short amount of time with like my mother-in-law coming for like 3 or so hours once a week. And that allowed me the time to find a healthcare professional and start therapy. And then in that time, I was also able to like interview for some part-time babysitters, and that further freed up time that gave me kind of like time back and some decompression time, because I think part of it really was the lack of sleep and the lack of time to do anything that wasn't baby oriented, whether it was like pumping or like eating, because like when you're pumping and breastfeeding, you're just famished all day long. I've never been so thirsty and hungry as I've been than I was when I was pregnant, or not pregnant, when I was breastfeeding, excuse me. So it's literally like sleeping when I can, eating enough food, pumping, cleaning parts. Like Chris would do tons of parts and stuff, but if like something happened during the day, like I would need to do some more. I bought like backups to the backups to the backups. I had like 4 sets of pump parts, 2 different types of pumps. So like there were tons around, but there's always dishes, there's always things to do. And I felt like I was just like on a rinse and repeat, and I didn't have any time. So I think finding that space to do other things that I enjoyed that wasn't strictly geared towards the child was very, very useful. And then obviously therapy. And then I think also with time, things get better, whether it's because you have the clarity of time or because she's getting older and not so needy and sleeping like increments longer, which means you're not quite so exhausted all the time. But I think all of those together help bring me along.
Yeah. Yeah. When you think about the therapist that you eventually worked with, what was your, I like that you took a step back to say, like, honestly, yes, I thought about the fact that I needed mental health first, but I also realized I needed time. So I appreciate that you're like, let me create time in my life. When you went to go find that therapist, how was that experience for you? Like, did you know where to look? Did you ask friends? Did you ask me for a referral? Like, where did you
I
find your therapist?
started with asking, I think you or your practice for some recommendations or referrals. My job has a pretty robust healthcare or health like insurance arm, and they have therapy as part of it. So I knew the site that I could like log on to, and they have therapists available. And I think what I was really focusing on is finding someone who's specialized in postpartum care, because that's what I really wanted and needed at that time. And there's also at my work, there's a forum or a Google group of, it's called Expectant New Mothers. And they have lots of recommendations and lots of women who have experienced it in the past, thousands of women, and they had lots of recommendations. By triangulating all 3 options, I honed in on like a list of, I think like 3 or 4 therapists. And then I reached out to all of them. And I was like, whoever has the time, please take me. Who has availability?
I need you now, stat.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I do think that one of there are many things about my job that I feel like we do really well, but one of the things I think we can do better is postpartum mood support, because you end up doing essentially what I think me and my team did with you, which is like, we give you this list of great therapists and psychiatrists who specialize in postpartum mood issues, but it's also just a list, right? Like, to me, the ideal is doing like a warm handoff where I can say, like, here is a person I'm literally putting hand to hand, like, this is a person who's going to care for you. And because of how the healthcare system works and because of how referrals work, we can't necessarily do that. And it puts a lot of onus on the person themselves, who, again, sometimes is really in the thick of it, to be like, hey, figure it out, call around, find the person who can take you the soonest. Can you figure out insurance? Okay, like, get on the phone with your insurance too and figure out who covers your insurance. It really is like an unfair burden for someone who already, presumably at the time, is feeling pretty overwhelmed. How was it for you when you were kind of narrowing it down? It sounds like you had 3 clinicians or 3 providers that you had, or 3 sources at least. How did you narrow it down? How did that work out for you?
I mean, I think I'm just like a really type A person. So once I like decided on a path forward, I found some comfort in
Mm,
like the process. So I got the list from you. I went on the site and I saw which people on the list matched up with what could be provided through my work healthcare. And then I got this other influx of information from other women at my job and who they use and whether they would recommend them. And then it narrowed it down. And like for me, that process was like comforting because I was like, okay, I'm making some progress.
mm.
But I also recognize for other people, it could be completely overwhelming to do so. Like I'm a list person. I really enjoy it. Does wonders for my anxiety on a day to day to like check a box on my to
Oh my
do.
God, I love check boxes. Oh, it feels so good.
Um, so like for me, it was helpful. And I think I ended up with a provider that was really useful for me, especially in that time of my life. But I do recognize for others, like, and I also, for others, it could be too daunting to have to do all three of those, or even to reach out to your healthcare professional and be like, can you provide me a list of uh, therapists or psychiatrists that specialize in this? Like that could be overwhelming. I also recognize the privilege that I have with having really great health insurance where everyone on the list was an option for me. And that's not the case for most people. So I know there are many steps that could befall a lot of others, but I'm thankful that I was in a situation given A, the space and the time to figure it out, and then B, I was in a situation that allowed me to have a lot of options available once I reached out and recognized I needed the help, which is like a difficult issue to kind of grapple with if you're in the healthcare profession of like, yeah, when someone's in the throes in the thick of it and they need immediate help, it would be really overwhelming to have to navigate that system or even to think like, okay, now I'm going to have to come out of pocket several $100s per session for this when maybe I can't afford that, or and that's another added anxiety slash stressor.
I mean, I'm a natural problem solver. I think that that's why I went into medicine because I like to like if someone comes in with like an ailment, I want to fix it. If someone has like something that has caused them pain, I want to heal it, right? Like so, when I hear you and I hear about the fact that you recognize your privilege in this moment, and I always recognize when I'm talking to anyone on this show so far, most of us are fortunate we've come from privilege, whether it's from our education or the jobs that we've acquired through our education. And because of that privilege, you had great insurance coverage and you were able to, find good healthcare providers so easily. But there are a lot of people who don't necessarily have that. And it's filling that gap, right? It's really trying to figure out how can we improve access for everyone, especially in a time of need. And something that I found really inspiring that you said was recognizing that you get some information about postpartum mood issues like while you're pregnant, but when you're pregnant, you're like, I'm pregnant. Like things are fine. Is my baby kicking? Like that's all that I really care about right now. And like, how can you present postpartum, the potentiality of postpartum mood disorders without being like a total killjoy either, right? You don't want to be a bummer and be like, hey, you're really happy right now, second trimester, great, but like this might happen,
The
like
end is coming.
the end is nigh. It really is. It's a delicate balance. I think, I guess this is me now having my own emotional vent test with you where I like recognize what I find so rewarding and yet humbling about my job is we really are, it's not just like one patient, it's two. And it's not just like one moment in time, like the point when you were sick with this and then we fixed you and the point after. It's like this whole entire trajectory of 10 months of pregnancy. So for some couples, actually years of trying to conceive, then 10 months of pregnancy, and then postpartum, whether it's just the cute first 6 weeks or 6 months after or years after, right? There is really this long like timeline that is very affects someone in such a big way, and understanding how to care for someone throughout that whole timeline. Anyway, I just had a moment where I just like, my job is hard, but also more importantly, being the person that wants to be pregnant and is pregnant and then becomes a parent, that's the hardest part. And so what makes my job hard is like just trying to figure out how to support that person along the way.
Yeah,
it's a
you
lot.
do have a hard job. And I do not envy that piece of it, because I don't know how, and if I had to put myself back in my zone of being this time in 2021 when I was pregnant, like if you, and I did the questionnaire at 20 weeks and I was, like I said, I was fine. Like I had no problems as far as I could tell. I was like going to these appointments, everything looks good. I don't feel anything. I'm going about living my life like nothing has changed. I'm not even really showing at this point. Like things are great. I'm feeling good. If you were to tell me like this could happen, I'd be like, yeah, all right, we'll cross that bridge if it comes to it. But it's like, no, you really won't. So it is an interesting figuring out how to help people that may not be showing the signs early on, because it could be easier to flag someone who's having maybe a difficult pregnancy and already exhibiting some symptoms. Like, yes, you can set them on the right trajectory, but someone who's like seemingly fine and going along, like you said, you don't want to be the killjoy, but you also want to set them up for as much success as possible, and maybe like expectations set a little bit.
Yeah. And it is, I mean, you don't know there's some people who are at risk, but you never really know who's going to be affected with postpartum mood, either anxiety, depression. It sometimes can be a sneak attack.
Yeah. It could be like one of those, I know there are checklists that you have to do or you have to complete. Like you have to go to the hospital tour and the birthing. Maybe it's like you have to check in with these 5 providers and see if like your insurance covers them or X, Y, and Z, just so you have it at the ready if needed. So you do the pre-work when you're like feeling good and dandy.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go. That's an idea right there. See, this is why, like I said, this is why I'm having these conversations. I think in these conversations, hopefully in this podcast community, like those amongst us, we will solve some problems together. That's my goal.
Yeah.
So thinking back to you and not like the big, national problem of mental health in America. Going back to Alana, how was your work with your therapist? Was it helpful? What were some of the tools that you felt like he or she gave you to help you get through that period?
She was definitely really helpful. And I think the tools that she gave me that helped me at the time was just like the freedom and like the level setting of saying like what you're feeling and what you're experiencing is fine. It is valid and it is normal for you. And you don't need to have added anxiety about you are having these feelings or you're feeling off kilter. Like this is normal for you. This happens to tons of women, and you're not going to do yourself any good by spiraling on it. So I think just kind of getting that like reassurance was very helpful for me, because that was part of what was making me feel terrible. It was like, well, we've tried for years to have this daughter or to have this child, and now I have this child, and I should be like over the moon and happy and smiling ear to ear and waking up every day just so joyful. And I'm not. I'm actually like quite sad and upset and like, this is not good. And I think just having that like freedom to express those feelings and hearing that it's not abnormal, it's not rare by any stretch, and that we can work through it and things will change. She gave me some like homework assignments where I would watch things on like catastrophizing and different forms of like coping mechanisms that people may have that aren't useful. And I think figuring out the type of person I am and tend to be was like very helpful / useful. To be like, oh yeah, that is exactly what I do. I take like a small thing and I make it bigger, and then I like dwell on it and I dwell on it, and then I don't sleep, and then I keep thinking about it and I rile myself up even more. And then it turns into like that small issue is affecting everything in my life. And now it's all crumbling down and it's all terrible. And now I can't sleep at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think those sorts of tools and like homework that she assigned me were really good of like causing me to like recognize when I'm getting into one of those negative thought patterns where I could like in sometimes in the moment it wouldn't happen, but after the fact, I'd be like, oh yeah, I was doing that, and that wasn't good. And then with time and like with practice and awareness, I can like today I can be like, this one bad thing is happening. It doesn't mean all the dominoes and the chips are going to fall and you're going to be like homeless and destitute out on the street and your life is over. Like things will be fine. Just one thing has not gone your way when lots of things have gone your way in your life. So just like calm down, take a walk, go have a sparkling water and chill out. Like that's the dialogue I give to myself. And I think it's from the benefit of having now enough years of therapy to be like, to recognize when I'm having negative thought patterns. And my natural inclination is to not use positive thinking, as my current therapist would say.
Yeah. No, but I think that I personally think that we all need therapists, like, because I think they are a resource, even when we feel fine, like it's good practice. And also it's because you can end up having someone in your back pocket when we do go through those acute moments of life. And it sounds like you've learned some like valuable resources and coping mechanisms that you now can bring into even other aspects.
Yeah. It's like the coping mechanisms. And I think it's also just the recognition of what's happening. And a lot of times, and I can even see it now, some of my coping mechanisms that I have made me successful in many different facets of my life. And it just so happens that like in this iteration of my life as a mother and a professional, like the coping mechanism that worked in law school and undergrad and maybe trying to like go up the ranks of a law firm of like grinding it out, that's great. Catastrophizing there, great, because you're going to be really good at issue spotting. With a baby, not so great.
It's fair.
So recognizing like certain tools that serve you well at one point won't serve you well later in life. And then recognizing when your thought patterns are not advancing you and like what I need personally. And I think that's what she really focused on, and what I tried to focus on then, and what I'm still working on today, which has been immensely helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to now talk a bit more about that village you alluded to, right? When you talked about your two-pronged approach to recognizing, hey, Alana's not fine. Mental health support was big, but you also, it sounds like, called in more help from Chris's family that's local, but you also integrated some like extra help. Can you tell us more about like your village then and what your village looks like now?
Yeah. So then I realized I was like, I need to get help. And I was like, I don't have any time. And I will give Chris the credit. He will be like, okay, we're going to bring my mom in for like 4 hours on Wednesdays and you're going to do what you need to do. And then it was my therapist at the time, who actually recommended, she was like, you do seem overwhelmed. Like you have a lot going on and a lot on your plate. Have you thought about getting more help? And I was a little reticent to have maybe more family help, because I liked kind of having like my space, like my home is my space. So I was like, okay, I can go out and maybe find like a babysitter or a nanny that can come in regularly. And then truthfully, I was like, and then maybe if this person works out really well, then when I go back to work in a few months, maybe they can become like the full-time nanny at that point in time. So it was really my therapist who was like, you need more time because you're getting overwhelmed. And with more time, you can kind of decompress, get back to you and get some of the things that like you enjoy / want to do, and not the things that you need to do or the things that you think you need to do. And that will help bring you back to some sort of equilibrium. So that's what my kind of like village became. It was my in-laws who were local, who would come over regularly, and we would still go over for like dinners, or they would come over for dinners and help out. But then it became having a part-time nanny coming 2 days a week, even though I was on leave, to help out around the house. And over time, that has transformed where I now recognize I need lots of help. My husband has a job that requires him to travel quite a bit, especially over the summer months. So between May and September, he's gone between 2 and 3 weeks of every month. And I was like, this is untenable if I'm going to be working also full time as a lawyer. And I now have a child that depends on me. Like, I can't do this without a partner around. So it was enlisting like my in-laws help. They also leave the country for a significant chunk of the summer. Like, my parents come in generally for 6 to 8 weeks now over the summer and stay in San Francisco to like lend a helping hand, especially when my husband's gone. We have a babysitter that we use. She comes every other Thursday evening and every other Saturday morning. And that's really useful for us because it gives us like a date night time for the two of us. If he's around, if he's not around, I call them like Alana dates. I will go out and go get a massage, and then I'll go get dinner by myself at a restaurant or something, and then I'll come back, or maybe I'll just like read another room, and it's just like time for me to just be with me and do kind of whatever it is I want. And that's kind of what my village looks like now, and it's making the concerted effort to build in time preemptively, and like say, because what I don't want to do is get to the point again when I don't have the time and now I'm trying to scramble to find something. But having it on the books is also really nice. It's like, I know on this Thursday, I'm going to have a little reprieve. And this Saturday morning, I can sleep in and I can do whatever I want. If I want to become a couch potato, or I say like I'm bed bugging, like I can do that. And I know I have that coming up, and that gives me a little bit of happiness and like, oh, I'm going to get a break. I'm going to get a little bit of a reprieve. And I recognize that that's something I need in my life. And once again, I have the privilege to be able to enlist that help and have parents who are retired and able-bodied enough to fly across the country and willing to live in San Francisco for 2 months a year to help me with my 2-year-old.
Yeah.
I recognize that is very lucky, and I'm very fortunate to have that. Very grateful.
Yeah. Well, they win some too, because Amari is pretty stinking cute. So trust me, they're not flying over for you. They're doing it for Amari. But yeah, it's so important, being able to rely on whether it's family or these outside sources that you have the fortune of being able to employ to make more time for yourself, to have like the sanctity of time, like knowing that like this is a Saturday morning that I can wake up whenever I want. Like that's my life now, except when I'm on call. And I can only imagine without having that built in, like how precious it is. And so I'm glad you've taken those steps to make that possible for yourself. I have a quick question out of curiosity, because I don't think you mentioned it. When you, in the early stages of Amari, did you work with a night nurse at all?
We had a night nurse that was supposed to start the second week of January because she was due the end of January. But she came so early that the night nurse was finishing up with another family. And then by the time she was available to start, like when we were supposed to be starting, we were already like well into the thick of it. And I was like, it was a month later, or like over a month later. And I was like, we're good.
Wait. Oh man, yeah, I think I remember us talking about that before. Yeah, that the timing, that Amari surprise arrival. Yeah. You had everything lined up. You really did have everything lined up.
I was ready. And
darn
then
it,
I was not. She's like, you think you're ready?
The best, as they say, the best laid plans, right? And so I think another thing that I really appreciate about our conversations over the years, is also just recognizing that the Alana that is not immediately connected to Mari and Chris is also like a badass, excuse my language, but a badass boss bitch, lawyer, quite successful. And you have this career that you've spent many years to build and develop. And I do think that there is something to be said about doing this full-time job, aka motherhood, and also having a full-time job. How's it been? You've now gone back to work for a year now, right? I know you had a long maternity leave, but you've been back to work for a while now. How has it been being a a mother with a career in like the 21st century, if you will?
It's definitely been trying, and I work at a company that has given me a lot of latitude. I had a little over I had 7 months of leave, which was really generous, and then I had a substantial ramp up period for about a month before I was fully back and integrated into the team. And my team is very flexible. I can work remotely, I can go into the office. We have no steadfast rules about number of hours I need to be or days I need to be in the office. So that has given me a lot of flexibility. But at the same time, it is a huge shift to go from like my priorities being my family and my job to, and my family, meaning like my husband or my parents who I can go have dinner with or like lunch with and do various activities that are different than a child who needs you to care from them from like 5 p.m. on. Like if I have a late work call or something, my husband can go live his life, but my daughter cannot. So it's been an interesting experience kind of like making that transition, but I have enjoyed going back to work. And I
Mm-hmm.
now recognize and give all the kudos in the world to stay at home mothers because I certainly could not do it.
Yeah.
The the cost of childcare in the Bay Area is exorbitant. And I was like, and I will pay virtually any amount of money for childcare is what I've learned because I really do. I don't like working per se, but I do like going to work and talking to colleagues and solving problems in the legal space, or maybe not even the legal space, just like the technology space and having those like adult conversations and using my brain in various ways. And not to say that you're not doing that when you are with your child, but the day in and day out of being the full time caretaker of a child is not something I found like particular joy in. And I think that is something I learned to acknowledge and understand. It's fine in therapy. It's like I can love my daughter and love being a
Mm-hmm.
mother, but not love being her caretaker because at this stage in her life, she's 2.5. Like I am a caretaker for her. Like
Yeah.
she has to eat the food that I provide for her. I have to bathe her. I have to change her diaper. She's potty training now, but like it's largely a caretaking role, and not enjoying that doesn't take away from the fact that like I love being her mother and I love her. It's just not something I care to do with the overwhelming majority of my day. So I am thankful that I was able to like transition back to work and get an outlet and get some time back and some space um, in furtherance of kind of like my recovery. And I do think going back to work did help quite a bit because it
Mm.
helped carve up my day in a way that was lacking beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I thank you for saying that. The real MVPs are the full-time stay-at-home moms. They are
They,
they're amazing. They are truly amazing.
they are incredible. I don't know how they have the energy.
Totally. It's nonstop. It's nonstop. At least like when you go to work, you're like, I can't deal. I'm at work. I gotta go. I
Yeah,
gotta go.
I gotta go. I gotta
But
go do something. I
yeah,
can like
yeah.
take a call walking around the block, or like I can rearrange something. Like a kid, there's no sick days. There's no
Mm-mm.
phoning it in. Like
Yeah. It's 24/7.
yes,
24/7. And
forever.
so thinking forever, ever, forever. And we've talked so much about, we've talked about you in this. We've talked now a little bit about you and your career. It sounds like the work is actually a reprieve. How has bringing Amari in the world, how has that affected your partnership? So, you and Chris, obviously husband and wife, but now are mom and dad. How is it being mom and dad? How is that different from being husband and wife?
Mom and dad is definitely very different. Now I refer to him as dad or as daddy because I'm like, daddy, say bye to daddy. Bye bye, daddy. And like We speak like a little 2-year-old now to each other. And it's definitely kind of changed the dynamic of our relationship. I mean, obvious, it's going to change the dynamic of the relationship. But before it was like, we could kind of do what we want. We could take weekend trips. We could watch Game of Thrones immediately on Sunday, right when it came out. But like, if she's having a hard time going to sleep, we're not doing anything until she's down. If she wants to go have a pizza party on Monday, like that's what we're going to go do. So I think what really has changed about becoming mom and dad rather than just husband and wife is we have to have those built-in times and kind of schedule our
Mm-hmm.
time together in a way and be
Mm-hmm.
more thoughtful about it in a way that we didn't have to before because there was just an abundance of time. So now
Mm-hmm.
we have those every other Thursdays that we can, well, maybe go get dinners together, arrange one-offs if we want to go see a concert or a play or something to that effect. We just have to be a little more thoughtful. And even on the weekends, we'll have like individual time with our daughter because I
Mm-hmm.
think that's useful is for him to have like his daddy daughter time and me to have like our mommy and me time. But then we'll also have family time and we'll both go to the park with her and then play with her, or we'll both go to the library or both do something with her for like one day a weekend. And those are kind of like planned activities that we have to think about like beforehand, where before Amari came into the picture, it kind of be like, do you want to go get dinner? Do you want to do this? Blah, blah, blah. But now the time that we do have together, we kind of like focus it on doing things that we both want to do. We
Mm-hmm.
both know we really enjoy doing because now our time, just the two of us, is limited. So we're not going to
Yeah.
waste it doing something that not, it wouldn't be a waste, but we're not going to do something that like only really one of us wants to do.
Yeah. No, it's precious. It's precious moments, right?
Yeah.
I think if anything, you just learn that you don't take free time for granted by any means. There's no like lazy Sundays anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like any time that you have is really intentional.
Yeah. And that's what we've tried to do. And it's definitely been some growing pains with figuring it out. But I think that's like part of the fun is like figuring out how do we grow into these new roles and these new avenues of our life. And we recognize it's not going to be forever. She's not going to be two forever. I'm sure we're going to about to be entering the phase when our weekends are completely not ours because we're going to be going to birthday parties and like
Mm-hmm.
activities galore. And that will be our entire weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when literally as you were speaking, I had this vision of a solar system, but Amari is the center of the solar system. And it's just you and Chris. Like I just see your beautiful heads just like orbiting around her.
She is the sun.
Yeah. Yeah. Her gravitational force is strong. It's very strong.
The force is strong with that one.
Force is strong with that one. And I really do think, and I hope, whoever is listening walks away from this conversation remembering that despite the gravitational force of any child, that what you're reminding me of in this conversation is still prioritizing you in all of this, right? Still putting me first as much as you can. Because that moment when you had your SOS moment where you pulled yourself out and you're like, wait, I need something for me in this was a precious moment that allowed you to be the person you are right now, right? Where you're in a better headspace, you're caring for yourself, you're prioritizing your own personal time, prioritizing date time with Chris. So, Amari's hecka cute and her force is strong, but really being able to make Alana time is even more important. So I'm glad you've been able to find that for yourself.
Yeah. Being selfish is not selfish. It's actually helpful for everyone. So anyone who's listening to this and is feeling bad or some of that mommy guilt about spending time literally just like laying in bed, doom scrolling or reading or watching terrible reality TV, I do it. And you know what? It's actually good for me. And that's what my therapist says because it's my decompression time. And if I don't take care of me and I'm not relaxed and happy, no one's going to be relaxed and happy.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. I think that being selfish, you said it so perfect. Being selfish is not selfish. I think that putting oneself first means that you're actually putting everyone else that relies on you first too. So thank you, Alana, for being so open and candid and honest with the things that were struggles for you in pregnancy. I think that my hope is that someone hears this and they don't feel so alone and they don't feel so hopeless. I'm so grateful not only for you as a friend, but I'm grateful for you because I think you're a valued resource to anyone that knows you. But for those of us, for those of them who might be listening right now, I hope that they took something away from this conversation today. So thank you, Alana. I so appreciate your time. Any last words that you want to share?
Any last word? Well, first, thank you for having me. I don't know if I'll have any last words other than like, it will get better. Like, I know when you're in the thick of it, it doesn't seem like there's a way out. It's like an insurmountable hole, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel, even if you can't see it at that very moment. Like, keep pressing on and it will get better. It sounds really cliche. If you would have asked me 2 years and 3 months ago, I would have been like, you're lying. This is my life on repeat. And it's terrible. But here I am today being like, I actually like going to work.
Here you are. And yes, it will get better. It seems to always get better. And we're grateful for that.
Yeah.
Well, again, I'm so grateful for you, Alana. Thank you so much for your time. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And I think today it's Monday, so it's pizza party day.
Pizza party. Hey. Yes. We're going to go get some pizza.
That's great. Lucky Amari. All right, my dear. Well, thanks again. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you very much for listening to The Golden Hour, the podcast community where moms and moms-to-be can hear stories from other mothers and learn from top experts in pregnancy and postpartum care. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and share with your friends so we can reach more people like you. You can visit goldenhour.fm for more information, resources, and all other episodes. If you have any requests, questions, or suggestions for future episodes, please email me at hello@goldenhour.fm or leave us a comment at goldenhour.fm on Instagram. Looking forward to seeing you in the next episode. Until then, stay golden.